guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Layne and I'm a nurse practitioner student and registered nurse. And today we're going to be talking about things to consider when choosing a DNP project. Thanks for watching. So DNP projects, I know that this can be a very intimidating and scary topic for my Doctorate of Nursing Practice fellow students because it's a lot of work that you have to put into this thing, and you're like, what topic's gonna be the best topic? Where am I gonna do this? So I'm hoping that some of these tips that I'm gonna talk about actually help you a little bit with kind of figuring out what you're gonna do for your project. So the first thing I would say is to start brainstorming early. So that could even mean as soon as you're accepted into a program or even a little bit before, start kind of thinking about maybe where you want to do this, what kind of topic you might want to pick, what have you seen as kind of a pain point in units that you've been on. Those can kind of get the ball rolling. And you know, even if you haven't started thinking about your topic, you'll still figure it out, trust me. Even that last year when you're starting to apply for IRB approval, some projects are still kind of evolving a little bit at that point. But to alleviate some of that stress, it would be better to start early, because in all of your research and leadership classes, you can already start writing papers about that topic that you've really been thinking about. And you can figure out, okay, maybe this actually isn't the topic that I want, or you might find a new topic. But it's kind of good to start laying that groundwork, because if you already have an evidence table from like a few semesters ago for your project, it's just easier to keep using the same data or just updating it as you're going along. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to do is look at your site. So what are the pain points of providers at your site? What are clinical indicators that need to be improved? What are things with patient satisfaction that could be improved? These are questions that can kind of get the ball rolling for you if you're not really sure where to even start. Because something that's going to be important for you is buy-in, stakeholder buy-in at the site. So if the site doesn't realize that there's an issue and you're kind of telling them like, hey, you guys need to be doing this, I'm not saying that you can't do a topic like that, because you can, but it's much easier for administration to be like, oh wow, like you're solving a problem that we knew that we had, and like they're really happy about it, versus you trying to point out problems that they have that maybe aren't a priority for them. So definitely look at your site. How can you make things better at that site, and what evidence is there to support it? And is there data that actually concretizes the fact that there's a problem there? Because sometimes, you know, people might be frustrated at a site, but they can't really point to like what the problem is. But when you're actually doing this QI project, you actually need to have data that you can track and supports that there's an issue, because as you're implementing and after you're implementing, you're going to be going back and comparing that data and being able to say that, hey, the data was X here, you know, maybe our CAUTI rates were here before I implemented my project. And after the project, this is what our CAUTI rates are, or this is what the other data point that has been improved is. You see what I'm saying? So you want to make sure that you have that before you actually start implementing, because that's going to be an issue if you kind of start implementing and then you realize like, oh, like actually the people are saying that we have a problem, but the data doesn't support it. You know what I mean? So definitely make sure that your project is tailored to your site. Some other things to consider when you're trying to tailor your project to your site is a major thing is, how does this benefit patients? Is there a systems focus or population focus? You know, if we don't do something about this problem, how does that affect the healthcare system, or how does that affect the patients within that system? And that's something that you're going to have to write about in your proposal as well as your final project, and just proving that like there actually is benefit and there's research supporting that we improve this, and that ultimately patient care will be better because of it. Okay, and so you're also going to want to make sure that this project is sustainable. So you want it to be something ideally that can be run on its own once you leave. It's not something that like only can happen because you're there, because that ultimately doesn't really benefit patients in the long run. You want to do something that like, hey, I have the champions there, I've laid the foundation that they can keep this going. And I mean, honestly, you have no control over if it actually does, but ideally it's something that can be sustainable when you're not there. And also with what we were talking about earlier, can you evaluate this? Like I said, is there data? Is there a way that you can actually continuously evaluate that something is improving? And then is it feasible? Is this something that's like, you know, would cost so much money and like, it's not really realistic. In a perfect world, this would be great, but it can't really happen. You want to make sure that it's something that you could actually do over the course of like a semester and implement. So with that, you also want to make sure you're not biting too much that you can chew, you know, like you don't want to pick a million different problems and try to implement all of that in a semester. You kind of want to stick to like a few, because unfortunately you can't really save the world in like a semester or in a degree. So this is just kind of laying the steps for future projects if you might be interested in those. Okay, and so then the next thing is, you know, you can kind of think outside the box. So it doesn't have to be exactly implementing one intervention. It could look like a bundle, an evidence-based bundle, like a CAUTI bundle, sepsis bundle. So it's a few different interventions kind of in there that you're evaluating. It could also be a health policy project if you're really into health policy. It could be implementing a program. So maybe if a hospital that you're working at or the site doesn't have a nurse residency program, and you could look at data that supports the use of a nurse residency program, implement that, and then you can evaluate how that's benefited the entity that or the site. And those can be a little bit harder depending on what you choose, but there can be a lot of benefits to that, and there can be a solid project in there. So if you want to think outside the box, that's something that you can definitely do. And then just going off of that, some things to avoid though, and making sure that it actually is a like DNP project that you're choosing, you want to avoid something that's research. So this is translating evidence into practice. You are not creating new evidence. So you're not creating or developing your own screening tool. You're also not creating a systematic review, which, I mean, you're gonna have an evidence table and an evidence review within your project, but the systematic review is not your project, okay? If that makes sense. Another thing is it's not going to be like an in-service. So this is not you know, I come in, educate, and that is the intervention. And then, you know, we evaluate right after the intervention. That's not your project. That might be part of your project. So part of your project might be educating people about the CAUTI bundle, but the actual project is the CAUTI bundle implementation, if that makes sense. So just make sure you're not getting tripped up with that. And then I know that it's not really so much about like nursing student education with this project. That's not really the focus, so just be careful about that. But definitely like make sure that you're talking to your advisors, your faculty advisors, getting their input on things. Like if your school has slightly different guidelines when it comes to projects, it should be pretty standardized, but you just want to make sure that you're working within what your school has decided that you need to do to graduate. And so kind of a spinoff off that is making sure that you're brainstorming with, you know, friends, coworkers, colleagues, faculty advisors, like I said. Just start early, bouncing off ideas. Like, hey, do you think this would be a good project? Do you think this would be a good project? Like, how can I make this project potentially better? And the more you're asking those questions and having those conversations early, I think it helps to alleviate some stress kind of on the back end when you're finally starting to do things. Because I know that can be really stressful and you're just like, what am I doing? What am I doing with this? So definitely start early, start thinking about these things. I hope that some of these tips helped you and helped alleviate a little bit of stress. But if you have questions, definitely comment below. I'd love to hear maybe even some potential projects that you guys are thinking of, because that's always a really cool thing to hear about. So anyway, please give this video a like and subscribe. I will be making more videos about DNP projects. So if you have questions specifically about that I can answer, please comment below, because I would love this to actually benefit you guys. All right, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, peace.